On a foggy night, four friends, Jake, Emily, Noah, and Lisa, stood outside the iron gates of Redwood Manor. The mansion was infamous for being haunted, and they had decided to spend the night there as a dare. They pushed open the heavy front door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the house was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and old portraits watched them from the walls. They moved into the living room, where a grand piano stood in one corner and a large, broken chandelier hung from the ceiling. Suddenly, the piano played a single, eerie note, making them all jump. They cautiously climbed the creaky staircase to the second floor. The hallway was long and dark, with several closed doors. A cold breeze made them shiver, and they heard faint, eerie whispers. They opened one door and found an old nursery. Dusty toys were scattered around, and a rocking chair in the corner started moving on its own. They heard a child's laughter echoing through the room. Panicked, they ran downstairs and found a door leading to the basement. Despite their fear, they decided to investigate. The basement was even darker and colder. Strange symbols were drawn on the walls, and old furniture was strewn around. In the basement, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw the ghostly figure of a woman in a tattered dress. Her hollow eyes stared at them as she whispered, "Leave this place." Screaming, they ran up the stairs and out of the house. The door slammed shut behind them, and they could still hear the ghostly whispers. They vowed never to return to Redwood Manor. Back at home, the friends sat together, still shaken by their experience. They knew they had encountered something truly terrifying and agreed never to speak of it again. Sarah and her husband, David, arrive at Silverwood Manor, an old estate they inherited from Sarah's distant relative. The house is imposing, with tall windows and ivy-covered walls. As they unpack, Sarah finds an old, dusty music box in the attic. Intrigued, she decides to keep it. That night, Sarah is awakened by the soft melody of the music box playing on its own. She also hears faint whispers and footsteps. Frightened, she wakes David, but the sounds stop as soon as he is awake. They both dismiss it as the house settling. The next day, Sarah and David find an old journal hidden in a secret compartment of the music box. It belonged to a girl named Eliza who lived in the house a century ago. The journal entries describe Eliza's fear of a dark presence in the house. That night, the whispers and footsteps return, louder and more menacing. Sarah sees a shadowy figure at the foot of her bed. The figure reaches out to her, and she screams, waking David. The figure vanishes, but the air remains cold and heavy. Desperate for answers, Sarah and David contact a local historian. The historian tells them about Eliza's tragic story. She was believed to have been haunted by a malevolent spirit and disappeared mysteriously. Her body was never found. Following the historian's advice, Sarah and David search the basement and find a hidden door behind some old crates. Inside, they discover a small room with old furniture and a large cracked mirror. The room is freezing, and they feel a strong, oppressive presence. Sarah looks into the mirror and sees Eliza's ghost. Eliza silently pleads for help, showing Sarah visions of her past and how the malevolent spirit trapped her in the hidden room. Eliza points to a spot on the floor where her remains are buried. Sarah and David dig at the spot Eliza indicated and find her remains. They perform a simple ritual to lay her spirit to rest. As they finish, Eliza's ghost appears one last time, smiling gratefully before fading away. The air becomes warm and peaceful. With Eliza's spirit at rest, Silverwood Manor feels lighter and more welcoming. The whispers and footsteps stop. Sarah and David decide to stay and restore the manor, feeling a deep connection to its history and to Eliza. Emma, a young woman in her early 20s, inherits an old house from her grandmother. The house is isolated, surrounded by thick woods, and has been abandoned for years. Emma decides to move in, thinking it will be a quiet place to write her novel. On her first night in the house, Emma hears strange noises coming from the attic. She dismisses them as the creaking of an old house settling and goes to bed. However, the noises grow louder and more disturbing as the night progresses. The next day, Emma decides to explore the attic. She finds an old rusty key in one of the drawers and uses it to unlock the attic door. The attic is filled with dusty old furniture, cobwebs, and forgotten belongings. Emma discovers a mysterious old trunk hidden in a dark corner. Emma opens the trunk and finds old family photographs, letters, and a peculiar-looking doll. As she examines the doll, she feels a sudden chill, and the attic door slams shut. The atmosphere grows colder, and Emma feels an unseen presence watching her. That night, Emma starts experiencing terrifying visions and hearing whispers. The doll seems to move on its own, appearing in different places around the house. Emma tries to get rid of the doll, but it always reappears. The house feels more sinister with each passing hour. Desperate to understand what's happening, Emma researches her family's history. She discovers that her great-grandmother practiced dark rituals and that the doll was used in these rituals to trap restless spirits. Emma realizes the spirits are now haunting her. Determined to end the haunting, Emma prepares a ritual to release the trapped spirits. As she performs the ritual in the attic, the spirits become increasingly aggressive, trying to stop her. Emma remains resolute, chanting the ancient words. The spirits' resistance peaks, and they manifest as terrifying apparitions. Emma faces them with courage, continuing the ritual despite the overwhelming fear. Finally, a blinding light envelops the attic, and the spirits are released, vanishing into the ether. With the spirits gone, the house feels peaceful once again. Emma breathes a sigh of relief and decides to stay, feeling a connection to her family's past. She sits by the window, looking out at the now calm and serene woods, ready to start her new life. Emma arrived at Hollow Hill, an old mansion inherited from a distant relative she never knew. Surrounded by a dense forest, the mansion looked abandoned and sinister. The sky was overcast, and a sense of unease washed over her as she approached the entrance. Emma pushed open the heavy wooden door, which groaned loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and musty. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs hung in the corners. An eerie silence filled the air, broken only by the distant sound of creaking floorboards. Emma stepped into the living room, where old furniture lay shrouded in white sheets. An old fireplace dominated one wall, with a large mirror above it. She saw a faint movement in the mirror, but when she turned around, the room was empty. The only sound was the faint ticking of an old clock. In the hallway, Emma found portraits of her ancestors. The eyes of the painted figures seemed to follow her. She felt a chill as she passed by a particularly stern-looking man. Suddenly, she heard a whisper, but when she turned around, no one was there. Emma discovered the mansion's library, filled with ancient books and old furniture. She found an old leather-bound journal on a desk. As she opened it, she read about dark rituals and mysterious deaths that plagued her family. The air grew colder, and she felt an unseen presence watching her. Emma noticed a hidden door behind a bookshelf. She hesitated, but pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. The air was damp and cold. Holding her flashlight, she descended the stairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silence. The basement was cold and damp, with strange symbols painted on the walls. An altar stood in the center, surrounded by melted candles and old, tattered books. As Emma approached the altar, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, and she heard distant, echoing whispers. Emma's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. Panic set in as she fumbled to turn the flashlight back on. When it flickered back on, she saw a ghostly figure standing by the altar, staring at her with hollow eyes. Desperate to escape, Emma turned and ran up the stairs. The house seemed to come alive, with doors slamming and shadows moving around her. She reached the front door, threw it open, and ran into the stormy night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached her car. Breathing heavily, Emma glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, vowing never to return. In the heart of the countryside, surrounded by dense, fog-laden woods, stood Blackwood Manor. The old mansion had been abandoned for decades, whispered to be cursed. The villagers spoke of eerie lights flickering in the windows and ghostly figures wandering the halls at night. A group of 5 friends, Emily, Jack, Sarah, Tom, and Lisa, decided to spend a night in Blackwood Manor to investigate the rumors. They arrived at dusk, their car crunching on the gravel driveway as they approached the looming dark structure. The friends pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of decay was overwhelming. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the floorboards creaked under their weight. In the library, Emily found an old journal. The pages were brittle, but she managed to read about the tragic history of Blackwood Manor. It was once home to the Blackwood family, who mysteriously vanished one night, leaving behind a curse. As night fell, strange things began to happen. Lisa felt a cold hand brush against her back, but when she turned, no one was there. Jack heard whispering voices calling his name from the dark corners of the house. Desperate for answers, Sarah suggested a seance. They gathered in the parlor, holding hands around a makeshift altar. As Sarah chanted, the candles flickered, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Suddenly, a ghostly figure appeared, its face twisted in anguish. The spirit of the youngest Blackwood child revealed that the family was murdered by a jealous relative who then cursed the house. The child's spirit pleaded for help to break the curse and set them free. The friends searched the house for the relic mentioned by the ghost. In the attic, they found an old, ornate box containing a cursed amulet. As they touched it, the air grew colder, and the house seemed to groan around them. Following the ghost's instructions, they took the amulet to the family graveyard behind the mansion. They placed it on the Blackwood family grave and recited the incantation. The ground trembled, and a blinding light erupted from the grave. As the light faded, the vengeful spirit of the jealous relative appeared, furious at being exposed. It attacked the friends, but they stood their ground, determined to end the curse. Emily, holding the amulet, confronted the spirit, chanting the incantation. With a final, anguished scream, the spirit dissolved into the night. The air grew still, and the oppressive feeling lifted. The ghosts of the Blackwood family appeared, smiling gratefully before fading away. The curse was broken. As dawn broke, the friends left Blackwood Manor, forever changed by their experience. The house, no longer shrouded in darkness, stood silent and peaceful. They knew they had freed the souls trapped within. In the heart of a small rural town sits Willow Lake, shrouded in mist and surrounded by dense woods. The lake's surface reflects the moonlight, casting an eerie glow across the water. Nearby, an old abandoned cabin stands hidden among the trees, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in ivy. A group of adventurous teenagers, Tom, Sarah, Emma, and Alex, gather at the edge of Willow Lake, exchanging nervous glances. They've heard rumors of strange occurrences at the abandoned cabin and decide to spend the night there as a dare. With a mix of excitement and apprehension, they approach the cabin. The group reaches the cabin and cautiously pushes open the creaky door. Inside, the air is musty, and dust dances in the beams of their flashlights. Cobwebs adorn the corners, and the floorboards creak under their weight as they step further into the darkness. As they explore deeper into the cabin, they encounter decaying furniture and peeling wallpaper. Strange symbols are etched into the walls, and the temperature drops noticeably. A sense of unease settles over the group as they realize they are not alone in the cabin. Suddenly, a chilling wind sweeps through the cabin, extinguishing their flashlights. In the darkness, they hear whispers and footsteps, echoing from all directions. Panic sets in as a ghostly figure materializes before them, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. With terror driving them, the teenagers flee from the cabin, their screams echoing through the woods. They stumble blindly through the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. Behind them, the ghostly figure watches with a sinister grin, knowing it has claimed yet another victim. Eventually, the teenagers emerge from the woods, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. They vow never to return to Willow Lake or the haunted cabin again, haunted by the memory of their terrifying encounter. But unknown to them, the ghostly figure still lurks in the shadows, waiting for its next victims.
It was a stormy night, the kind that forces even the bravest souls to stay indoors. Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the howling wind rattling the windows. She glanced at the clock, 11:45 p.m. Just 15 more minutes until midnight. She tried to focus on the book in her lap, but a sense of unease crept over her, making it impossible to concentrate. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour, in such weather? She hesitated, then slowly walked to the door, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the house. Peeking through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling slightly. No response. She turned away, thinking it must have been the wind playing tricks on her, when the knock came again, louder this time. Determined to face her fears, she unlocked the door and opened it a crack. A blast of cold air hit her, and there on the doorstep stood a small child, drenched and shivering. The child's face was hidden beneath a dark, hooded raincoat. "Can I come in?" the child asked, voice barely audible over the storm. Sarah hesitated. Something about the child felt off, but she couldn't leave them out in the cold. "Of course," she said, stepping aside to let the child in. "What's your name?" The child didn't answer. Instead, they silently moved past her and stood in the center of the living room, water pooling around their feet. Sarah closed the door and turned to face the child, noticing that despite the soaking clothes, the child's face was eerily dry. "Where are your parents?" Sarah asked. But the child remained silent. She moved closer, intending to help remove the wet raincoat, but the child stepped back, finally lifting their head. Sarah gasped. The face beneath the hood was not that of a child, but of something far older with hollow, sunken eyes and a twisted grin. "They couldn't make it," the entity whispered, voice dripping with malice. Fear paralyzed Sarah as the creature took a step forward. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The lights flickered and the room grew colder. Suddenly, the clock struck midnight, and with each chime, the creature grew larger and more menacing. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind racing for an escape. As the final chime echoed through the house, the creature lunged at her, its bony fingers outstretched. In a final act of desperation, Sarah grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and swung it with all her might. The creature let out an unearthly screech and vanished into thin air, leaving Sarah alone in the dark, trembling and gasping for breath. The storm outside began to subside, and a strange calm settled over the house. Sarah looked around, her heart still pounding, but the creature was gone. She locked the door, bolted the windows, and spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, the candlestick clutched tightly in her hands. As dawn broke, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. She had survived the night, but she knew deep down that the creature was still out there, waiting for another stormy night. In a remote corner of the countryside lies an abandoned mansion, its once grand facade now crumbling with neglect. 4 adventurous friends, Emma, Jack, Lily, and Max, embark on a dare to spend the night inside. As they approach, the moon casts eerie shadows on the broken windows. With trepidation, they push open the rusty gates and step into the mansion's courtyard. The air is heavy with the scent of decay, and the sound of their footsteps echoes off the crumbling walls. As they enter the main entrance, a chill runs down their spines. Inside, they find themselves in a maze of decrepit hallways and abandoned rooms. Dust hangs in the air, and the silence is suffocating. Strange symbols are etched into the walls, and the floorboards creak ominously beneath their feet as they explore deeper into the mansion's depths. As they enter a long abandoned ward, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to echo through the halls. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the air with an otherworldly chorus that sends shivers down their spines. Suddenly, they come face to face with a ghostly apparition, a spectral figure with hollow eyes and tattered clothing. Its ethereal form glides towards them, its movements hauntingly graceful. Frozen with fear, they realize they are in the presence of something not of this world. With a collective scream, the friends turn and flee from the mansion, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the dark hallways, their breath ragged and their footsteps echoing off the walls. Behind them, the ghostly whispers follow, urging them to return to the darkness. Exhausted and trembling, the friends emerge from the mansion, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They vow never to speak of their night in the abandoned mansion again, haunted by the echoes of the forgotten souls that linger within its walls.
Emily, Jake, and Sarah arrived at Blackwood Manor, an ancient, crumbling estate shrouded in mist. The manor had been abandoned for decades, and stories of its haunting were legendary. They were there to document the paranormal activity for their online show. "This place is seriously creepy," Sarah said, shivering as she stepped out of the car. "That's the point," Jake replied, setting up his camera. "The spookier, the better." Emily led the way up the overgrown path to the front door, her excitement mixed with unease. Let's get inside and start setting up. Inside the manor, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. The grand hall was filled with old furniture, draped in white sheets. As they explored, they found evidence of the past: old portraits, tattered books, and broken artifacts. "Look at this," Sarah said, picking up an old locket. "It must have belonged to someone important." Jake filmed everything, capturing the unsettling atmosphere. "This is going to be great footage." Emily found an old diary on a dusty table. "This might tell us what happened here." Emily read aloud from the diary, which detailed the tragic story of the Blackwood family. They had practiced dark rituals, summoning spirits that ultimately led to their downfall. The diary ended abruptly, hinting at a terrible event. "This is so creepy," Sarah said, looking around nervously. "We need to document everything," Jake insisted. "This is gold." As Emily closed the diary, a sudden chill filled the room. The lights flickered, and they heard a distant whisper. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. A shadow moved across the hall, catching their attention. They followed it to a room at the end of the corridor. Inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, and they saw a figure standing by the window. "Who's there?" Jake called out, but there was no response. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face twisted with pain and anger. It lunged at them, and they ran, slamming the door behind them. "We need to get out of here," Sarah screamed. "Not yet," Emily said, her fear giving way to determination. "We have to finish what we started." Emily found instructions for a banishment ritual in the diary. They gathered candles, chalk, and other items needed for the ritual. The air was thick with tension as they worked quickly, knowing the spirit could return at any moment. "Are you sure this will work?" Jake asked, lighting the candles. "It has to," Emily replied, drawing a circle on the floor. "We don't have any other choice." Sarah stood guard, her eyes darting around the room. "Hurry up. I don't want to be here any longer than we have to." As they began the ritual, the spirit returned, more furious than before. It howled and thrashed against the invisible barrier created by the circle. Emily chanted the incantation from the diary, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Keep it away from us," Sarah yelled, clutching a candle. "We're almost there," Emily shouted back, her focus unwavering. The spirit's form began to waver and dissolve as the ritual reached its climax. With one final desperate scream, it vanished into thin air. The friends collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a peaceful silence. "We did it," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's get out of here," Sarah urged, her eyes still wide with fear. They gathered their things and left the manor, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. As they walked away from Blackwood Manor, they felt a sense of triumph and relief. "Let's never do this again," Jake said, managing a weak smile. As they walked away from the manor, the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the forest. The manor behind them was now just a distant memory, a place they would never forget but never return to. "Let's make a pact," Emily said, stopping to look at her friends. "We never speak of this again." "Agreed," Jake and Sarah said in unison. They walked on, the past behind them and the future ahead, grateful to have survived the haunting of Blackwood Manor. Jonathan, a middle-aged man with a strained relationship with his family, receives a letter informing him of an inheritance from his late uncle. The inheritance includes a remote mansion in the countryside. Curious and financially strained, Jonathan decides to visit the mansion with his wife, Laura, and their teenage daughter, Megan. Laura looks worried. "Are you sure about this? We don't even know much about your uncle." Jonathan nods. "We need a fresh start, and maybe this place can offer that." Megan, always the adventurous one, says excitedly, "It'll be like an adventure." The family arrives at the mansion late in the afternoon. The mansion stands tall and imposing, surrounded by a dense forest. The air is thick with the scent of decay, and the atmosphere is eerily quiet. Megan shivers. "This place feels off." Jonathan, trying to be positive, says, "It's just old. Let's see what's inside." Laura clutches Megan's hand. "Stay close, honey." Inside, the mansion is filled with dust and cobwebs. The furniture is covered with white sheets, and the air is musty. As they explore, Megan finds an old, ornate mirror in one of the rooms. The mirror's surface is strangely clean compared to the rest of the house. "Look at this mirror," Megan calls out. Laura touches the frame. "It's beautiful, but out of place here." Jonathan frowns. "Why is it so clean?" That night, the family tries to settle in. Jonathan and Laura fall asleep quickly, but Megan struggles. Around midnight, she hears faint whispers and feels a cold breeze. The mirror in her room begins to fog up, revealing words written from the inside. "Help us," it reads. Terrified, Megan runs to her parents' room. "Mom, Dad, there's something in the mirror." Jonathan, groggy, tries to comfort her. "It's just your imagination, Megan. Go back to sleep." The next day, the family visits the local library to learn more about the mansion. They discover that it was owned by Jonathan's uncle, who was a reclusive and eccentric man interested in the occult. Laura reads from an old newspaper. Local recluse found dead under mysterious circumstances. Mansion believed to be haunted. Jonathan sighs. "This explains a lot. We need to be careful." Megan, still shaken, adds, "What if the spirits are still here?" Back at the mansion, Jonathan discovers a hidden door in the basement. Inside, they find an old study filled with books on the occult, strange artifacts, and a large, locked chest. Laura examines a book. "He was really into dark stuff. This can't be good." Jonathan tries to open the chest, but fails. "We need to find the key. There might be answers inside." Megan points to a strange symbol on the wall. "I've seen this symbol before, in my room." That night, the hauntings escalate. Objects move on their own, and ghostly apparitions appear. Megan is dragged out of bed by an unseen force, and Laura sees a shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway watching them. "We have to leave now," Laura screams, but the doors are locked and won't open. Jonathan grabs an old book from the study. "This book has instructions to banish the spirits. We need to perform the ritual." Desperate, the family gathers in the basement to perform the ritual. They light candles and arrange the symbols in a circle. Jonathan reads the incantation aloud, while Laura and Megan hold hands, trembling. As the ritual progresses, the house shakes, and the spirits grow more agitated. A blinding light fills the room, and the spirits are drawn into the circle, screaming. "Keep going, Jonathan!" Laura yells over the noise. With a final shout, Jonathan completes the incantation and the spirits vanish. The house falls silent. The next morning, the mansion feels different. The oppressive atmosphere is gone, and sunlight streams through the windows. The family packs up their belongings, relieved that the ordeal is over. "We should tell someone about this place," Laura says, looking back at the mansion. Jonathan nods. "Let's make sure no one else has to go through this." They drive away, leaving the mansion behind. Back home, life seems to return to normal. But one night, Megan finds the old mirror in her room, even though they left it at the mansion. Her heart races as she sees words slowly appear on the surface. "We are not done," it reads. Megan turns to see a shadowy figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with malevolence. She screams as the room plunges into darkness. On a dark, stormy night, 5 friends, Alice, Ben, Clara, David, and Eva, walk down a desolate street. They come across an old, dilapidated house at the end of the road. The house is known among locals as the last house on the street and is rumored to be haunted. Despite their fear, curiosity gets the better of them, and they decide to explore the house. The door creaks loudly as they push it open, revealing a dusty, abandoned interior. They enter the living room, which is filled with old furniture and a large, cracked mirror on the wall. Suddenly, the door slams shut behind them, and they hear faint whispering. The whispering leads them to a hidden door behind the stairs, which opens to a dark basement. Hesitant but determined, they descend the creaky steps, the air growing colder with each step. In the basement, they find an old chest. When they open it, they discover ancient cursed artifacts and a diary. The diary tells the story of a family that disappeared mysteriously, and it warns of a malevolent spirit trapped in the house. As they read the diary, the temperature drops, and a chilling presence fills the room. Shadows begin to move on their own, and the friends see a ghostly figure emerging from the darkness. Realizing they need to escape, they run back up the stairs. The house seems to come alive, with doors slamming and windows shattering. They finally break free and run out into the stormy night, vowing never to return. Back in the safety of their homes, they sit together, shaken but relieved. They know they will never forget the night they encountered the haunted house at the end of the street.
Lucy and her husband, Mark, move into an old Victorian-style house they bought at a bargain price. The house is large and filled with antique furniture. As they unpack, Lucy finds a covered portrait in the attic. She pulls off the cloth, revealing a beautiful woman with haunting eyes. She decides to hang it in the living room. That night, Lucy wakes up to strange noises, soft whispers and the sound of footsteps. She dismisses it as the house settling. When she looks at the portrait, the eyes seem to follow her. She feels a chill but convinces herself it's just her imagination. The next day, Lucy hears whispers coming from the living room. She finds Mark staring at the portrait, mesmerized. When she touches his shoulder, he snaps out of it, claiming he heard the woman in the portrait whispering his name. Lucy starts to feel uneasy about the painting. Determined to understand the painting's origins, Lucy visits the local library. She discovers that the woman in the portrait is Isabella, a former owner of the house who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. It's rumored that her spirit haunts the house. That night, the whispers grow louder, and Lucy sees a shadowy figure moving through the house. The air grows cold, and the portrait seems to come alive, the woman's expression changing to one of anger. Lucy feels a strong, malevolent presence. Lucy and Mark contact a paranormal investigator. The investigator explains that Isabella's spirit is trapped and angry. He suggests they find something that belonged to Isabella and use it to perform a ritual to release her spirit. Lucy searches the attic and finds an old diary belonging to Isabella. The diary details her life and the love she lost. It also mentions a locket that she cherished. Lucy finds the locket hidden in a secret compartment in the attic. Lucy and Mark, guided by the paranormal investigator, perform the ritual using the locket. As they chant, the house shakes, and Isabella's ghostly figure appears. She looks sad but grateful. She reaches out, touches the locket, and then fades away. The air becomes warm and peaceful. With Isabella's spirit at rest, the house feels lighter and more welcoming. The whispers and footsteps stop. Lucy and Mark decide to stay and cherish the history of the house. They hang the locket in a special place to remember Isabella. Months later, Lucy and Mark enjoy their peaceful home. They often think about Isabella and the extraordinary events that brought them closer together. The house is no longer haunted, but the memories of the past live on in a peaceful way. At the edge of town lies the entrance to the Whispering Woods, a place shrouded in mystery and whispered tales of the supernatural. The path winds its way into the heart of the forest, disappearing into the dense mist that clings to the trees like a shroud. Deep within the woods, a group of friends has set up camp for the night, seeking adventure in the unknown depths of the forest. A small campfire crackles and hisses, casting flickering shadows that seem to dance in time with the whispers that echo through the trees. In a moonlit clearing, the dense canopy of trees creates an oppressive atmosphere, suffocating the sounds of the night. Moss-covered ground crunches beneath the feet of the campers as they venture deeper into the heart of the woods, a sense of foreboding settling over them like a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, the group stumbles upon an old abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. Its windows are shattered, and the door hangs off its hinges, swinging ominously in the breeze. Moonlight filters through the cracks in the walls, casting eerie shadows that seem to dance and sway with a life of their own. Inside the cabin, the main room is a scene of decay and neglect. Decaying furniture sits shrouded in cobwebs, and dust hangs thick in the air like a tangible presence. The only sound is the creaking of floorboards beneath their feet and the distant whispers that seem to emanate from the very walls themselves. In the bedroom, a tattered mattress lies abandoned amidst peeling wallpaper and crumbling plaster. Moonlight filters weakly through a cracked window, casting eerie shadows that seem to writhe and twist upon the walls like living things. Descending into the basement, the air grows thick with the scent of decay and mold. Rusted chains hang ominously from the ceiling, their purpose long forgotten. The sound of dripping water echoes through the darkness, a constant reminder of the relentless passage of time. In the attic, cobwebs cling like shrouds to forgotten relics of a bygone era. Dusty trunks sit amidst a clutter of long-forgotten possessions, their secrets buried beneath layers of neglect. Moonlight filters through a broken skylight, casting an ethereal glow upon the abandoned treasures that lie hidden in the shadows. Venturing deeper into the heart of the woods, the trees close in around them like silent sentinels, their twisted branches reaching up towards the sky like gnarled fingers. Moonlight struggles to penetrate the thick canopy, casting eerie shadows that seem to dance and sway with a life of their own. As dawn breaks, the first light of morning filters through the trees, casting a golden glow over the clearing. The campfire smolders, its flames reduced to embers, and the forest is bathed in an eerie silence that seems to linger long after the night has passed. It was a gloomy autumn afternoon when Emma, Liam, and Sarah arrived at Hollow Hill. The old mansion, inherited by Emma from a distant relative, stood isolated atop a hill surrounded by thick leafless trees. The wind howled and the sky was an ominous gray. "This place is huge," Liam said, looking up at the towering structure. "And creepy." Emma nodded, clutching the old rusted key. "Let's get inside before it gets dark." They pushed open the creaky door and stepped into a grand dusty foyer. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and shadows danced in the corners. The interior of the mansion was just as foreboding. Cobwebs draped the chandeliers and the floorboards creaked under their weight. As they explored, they found rooms filled with antique furniture, old portraits, and thick layers of dust. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a large, dusty portrait of a stern-looking man. "He must be one of your ancestors, Emma." Emma shivered. "Let's keep looking." In the library, they discovered a collection of ancient books. One particularly old book caught Emma's eye. It was bound in dark leather with a strange symbol on the cover. "This looks interesting," Emma said, opening it carefully. That night, they settled into their rooms. The mansion was eerily silent, with only the sound of the wind outside. As Emma lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Suddenly, she heard whispers. Sitting up, she saw a shadow move across the room. "Who's there?" she called out. But there was no response. Terrified, she ran to Liam's room. "Liam, I saw something." Liam rubbed his eyes. "It was probably just your imagination. This place is spooky." But Emma knew what she saw. Something was not right in Hollow Hill. The next day, Emma and her friends decided to investigate the history of the mansion. In the library, they found an old journal belonging to the man in the portrait, Sir Edward Holloway. "Listen to this," Emma said, reading aloud. "He writes about strange rituals and dark magic." Sarah's eyes widened. That explains the creepy vibes. As they continued reading, they discovered that Sir Edward had conducted forbidden experiments, trying to unlock the secrets of immortality. Many people had gone missing in the area during his time. "This is bad," Liam said. "We need to be careful." While exploring the basement, they stumbled upon a hidden door behind a stack of old crates. Inside, they found a secret laboratory filled with strange equipment and jars containing bizarre specimens. "This must be where Sir Edward conducted his experiments," Liam said, examining the equipment. On a table, they found an old diary. As Emma read it, she discovered detailed accounts of the rituals and experiments Sir Edward had performed. "He was trying to summon something," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Something evil." Suddenly, the air grew cold, and they heard a low, guttural growl. That night, the mansion came alive with supernatural activity. Doors slammed shut, lights flickered, and ghostly figures appeared in the hallways. Emma, Liam, and Sarah huddled together, terrified. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice shaking. But as they tried to leave, the front door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself was trapping them inside. "There's no way out," Liam said, panic in his voice. Emma remembered the book she found in the library. "There must be a way to stop this. We need to find the ritual to banish whatever he summoned." Back in the library, Emma frantically searched through the book for the banishment ritual. The ghostly figures grew more aggressive, knocking over furniture and whispering threats. "Here it is," Emma shouted, finding the ritual. As she began to recite the incantation, the room grew colder. A dark, shadowy figure appeared, towering over them. "You cannot banish me," the figure hissed. "This house is mine." Emma's voice wavered, but she continued the ritual. The shadow screamed in rage, its form flickering and destabilizing. "Keep going, Emma," Liam urged. The shadowy figure lunged at them, but a bright light emanated from the book, pushing it back. Emma continued the incantation, her voice gaining strength. "You will not win!" the shadow roared, but it was growing weaker. With a final burst of energy, Emma completed the ritual. The shadow screamed one last time before disintegrating into a cloud of dark mist. The mansion shook violently, then fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the ghostly figures vanished. "We did it," Sarah said, tears of relief in her eyes. But Emma knew it wasn't over. The house had secrets yet to reveal. In the days that followed, the mansion remained quiet. Emma and her friends cleaned up and prepared to leave. But as they packed, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. "We should go," Liam said. "This place is too dangerous." Emma nodded. "Let's leave this nightmare behind." They locked the mansion and drove away, vowing never to return. But as they looked back, they saw a figure in the window watching them leave. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered. "Just keep driving," Emma said, gripping the wheel tightly. "We're never coming back." Back in their hometown, life slowly returned to normal. But Emma couldn't forget what happened. One night she found the old book on her bedside table, even though she had left it at the mansion. Her heart raced as she opened it. The pages had changed, now filled with new, ominous entries. "Welcome back," a voice whispered behind her. Emma spun around to see the shadowy figure from the mansion, its eyes glowing with malevolence. "You can never escape Hollow Hill," it said, reaching out for her. Emma screamed, the room plunging into darkness. The sun was setting as Emily, a young journalist, arrived at Ravenswood Manor. She had heard rumors of the haunted mansion and wanted to investigate for her next big story. The old, decaying building stood at the edge of the town, surrounded by overgrown trees. As she approached the iron gates, a sense of dread washed over her. Emily pushed open the heavy wooden door, which creaked loudly. Inside, the mansion was dark and cold. Dust covered the floor and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. She turned on her flashlight, revealing a grand but neglected interior. Her footsteps echoed ominously as she walked down the main hallway. In the dim light, Emily noticed portraits lining the walls. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow her every move, making her uneasy. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper, like someone calling her name. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. Her heart began to race. Emily entered the music room, where an old piano stood covered in dust. As she approached, she heard a soft, haunting melody. The keys were moving on their own, playing a melancholic tune. The room grew colder, and Emily felt an unseen presence watching her. In the library, Emily found a hidden door behind a bookcase. Inside, she discovered a small room filled with strange artifacts and an old leather-bound journal. She opened the journal and read about dark rituals and a curse placed on the mansion. The final entry warned of a vengeful spirit trapped within the house. As Emily read the journal, the temperature dropped sharply. She heard footsteps approaching and saw a shadowy figure materialize in the doorway. The figure was a ghostly woman with a twisted expression of rage. She pointed at Emily, her voice echoing with anger. "You must leave this place!" Emily's survival instincts kicked in, and she bolted from the hidden room. She raced through the dark hallways, the spirit's angry screams echoing behind her. She reached the front door and flung it open, escaping into the night. Gasping for breath, she looked back to see the mansion standing silent and still, but she knew she had been lucky to escape with her life. Safe at home, Emily reviewed her notes and the footage she had captured. The evidence of the haunting was undeniable. She wrote her article, revealing the mansion's dark history and the vengeful spirit. As she finished, she felt a cold breeze and heard a whisper, "Thank you." She knew the spirits had found some peace.
Anna and her husband, Tom, arrive at Blackwood Manor, an old mansion they inherited from Anna's late uncle. The house is grand, but has been abandoned for years. As they explore, Anna finds a dusty old journal in the study. Curious, she decides to read it later. That night, Anna wakes up to strange noises, whispers, and faint footsteps. She dismisses it as the house settling. When she looks out the window, she sees a flickering light in the garden. She turns to wake Tom, but the light disappears when she looks back. The next day, Anna reads the journal. It belonged to her uncle, who wrote about a mysterious figure he saw in the house. The entries become more frantic, describing how the figure tormented him. His last entry warns about a hidden room in the attic. Determined to find the hidden room, Anna and Tom search the attic. They discover a concealed door behind some old furniture. Inside, they find an old nursery filled with dusty toys and a large, cracked mirror. In the mirror, Anna briefly sees a shadowy figure standing behind them. That night, the haunting intensifies. Anna sees the shadowy figure in the mirror again, now clearer and more menacing. The air grows cold, and she hears a chilling whisper saying, "Find my child." Terrified, she realizes the ghost is trying to communicate. Anna tells Tom about her experiences. They decide to seek help from a local historian. The historian tells them about the tragic history of Blackwood Manor, involving a woman named Eleanor, who lost her child and died in despair. Her spirit is believed to haunt the house. Following the historian's advice, Anna and Tom search the garden and find a small, unmarked grave hidden among the overgrowth. They realize it's the grave of Eleanor's child. They decide to perform a simple ritual to give the child a proper burial. Anna and Tom perform the ritual, laying flowers and saying a prayer. As they finish, they see Eleanor's ghost appear, looking peaceful. She silently thanks them before fading away. The air feels warmer and the oppressive atmosphere lifts. With the ritual complete, the haunting stops. The house feels lighter and more welcoming. Anna and Tom decide to stay, feeling a deep connection to the house and its history. They keep the journal as a reminder of the past they helped lay to rest. Months later, Anna and Tom enjoy their peaceful home. They often think about Eleanor and the child, and are grateful for the experience that brought them closer together and helped them appreciate their new home. The memories of the past live on, but in a peaceful way.
In the heart of a dense forest stood an old, forgotten asylum. It had been abandoned for decades, its history buried under layers of dust and overgrown vines. The locals believed it was cursed, and no one dared to go near it. However, a group of 4 friends, Jake, Lisa, Ben, and Sarah, decided to explore it after hearing the eerie tales. "Are we really doing this, Injato Selwyn?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. "Of course," Jake replied, leading the way. "It's just an old building." As they approached the asylum, the air grew colder, and an unsettling silence surrounded them. Inside, the asylum was even more ominous. The walls were lined with peeling paint, and the floor was covered in debris. The air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. "This place gives me the creeps," Ben said, his flashlight illuminating the dark corridors. "Just stick together," Jake said, trying to sound brave. "We'll be fine." As they moved deeper into the asylum, they heard faint whispers and distant footsteps, though they were the only ones there. Or so they thought. While exploring a particularly dark hallway, Lisa suddenly screamed. "Did you see that?" She pointed towards a shadowy figure that disappeared around the corner. "What did you see?" Jake asked, rushing to her side. "A person, or something that looked like one," Lisa replied, shaking. "Let's check it out," Ben suggested, though his voice was shaky. They cautiously followed, but the figure was gone. Instead, they found an old, rusted wheelchair with fresh scratch marks on the floor. In one of the rooms, they found old patient records and disturbing photos. The files detailed horrific experiments conducted on the patients. "This is sick," Sarah said, flipping through the documents. "No wonder this place is abandoned." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The friends rushed to open it, but it was stuck. The room grew colder, and they heard a low, guttural growl. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, panic setting in. They managed to pry the door open and fled down the corridor. The whispers grew louder, and they could feel a presence following them. Sarah looked back and saw shadowy figures closing in. "Run!" she screamed. They raced through the maze-like hallways, trying to find an exit. The spirits of the asylum's past residents seemed to be everywhere, their wails echoing through the walls. "We're not alone," Ben panted, fear evident in his voice. The group stumbled upon a chapel within the asylum, its stained glass windows cracked but still intact. The room had an eerie calmness, and the spirits seemed to avoid it. "Maybe we can hide here," Lisa suggested, her voice trembling. They barricaded the doors and huddled together, trying to catch their breath. As they sat in the dim light of their flashlights, they noticed a hidden door behind the altar. "Should we check it out?" Jake asked. "We don't have a choice," Ben replied. They opened the hidden door and found a narrow staircase leading down to a secret basement. The air grew colder as they descended. The basement was filled with old medical equipment and cages. "This must be where they conducted their experiments," Sarah whispered. As they explored, they found a large, iron-bound book filled with incantations and rituals. The book seemed to pulse with a dark energy. "We need to destroy this," Jake said. "It might be the source of the curse." With the book in hand, they returned to the chapel. They decided to perform a ritual to break the curse. As they began chanting from the book, the spirits became more aggressive, banging on the doors and windows. "Keep going," Alex shouted. The room shook, and the spirits' wails grew louder. Just as it seemed the spirits would break through, a blinding light filled the chapel, and the spirits screamed one final time before vanishing. "It's over," Emily whispered, dropping the book. The spirits gone, the friends made their way out of the asylum. The building seemed less menacing now, the air lighter. "We made it," Lisa said, relief evident in her voice. As they reached the forest edge, they turned back to see the asylum one last time. It stood silently, as if the horrors within had finally been laid to rest. "We should go," Ben said, "and never speak of this place again." Back in town, life slowly returned to normal. The friends promised each other to never speak of the asylum again. However, the memories of that night lingered. A few weeks later, Sarah received a package. Inside was another iron-bound book, similar to the one they had destroyed. Attached was a note, "For your collection." Her heart raced as she realized the curse might not be broken after all.
Clara arrived at Ashwood House, an eerie, dilapidated mansion she had inherited from her aunt. The mansion stood on a hill, surrounded by dense, dark woods. The air was thick with fog, and the only sound was the distant hooting of an owl. As Clara walked up the creaky wooden steps, the front door slowly swung open on its own. Clara stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty hallway. Dust covered the floors, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The walls were lined with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors. She felt a sudden chill as she closed the door behind her, the silence inside the mansion almost deafening. Clara moved into the living room, where old, tattered furniture was draped in white sheets. An antique piano sat in one corner, its keys yellowed with age. As she walked past, she heard a single note play, sending shivers down her spine. She turned quickly, but no one was there. In the dining room, Clara found a large portrait of her Aunt Margaret above the fireplace. The eyes in the portrait seemed to follow her every move. As she stared at the painting, she heard faint whispering, as if someone was trying to communicate with her. She felt a cold breeze brush past her. In the library, Clara discovered an old, leather-bound diary hidden behind a row of books. The diary belonged to her aunt and detailed strange occurrences and eerie experiences in the house. As she read, the room grew colder, and she felt as if someone was watching her. Behind a bookshelf, Clara found a hidden door leading to a narrow, spiral staircase. She hesitated, but felt compelled to explore. Holding her flashlight, she descended the stairs, each step echoing in the darkness. The air grew colder and more oppressive with every step. The basement was damp and filled with old, dusty furniture covered in sheets. Strange symbols were drawn on the walls. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table with a black candle, which suddenly lit itself. Clara felt a sense of dread as she approached the table. Clara's flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She spun around to see a ghostly figure of her Aunt Margaret, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Leave this place," the ghostly figure whispered. Panic-stricken, Clara ran up the stairs, the house seeming to come alive with doors slamming and shadows moving. She burst through the front door into the night, her heart pounding. She didn't stop running until she reached her car, vowing never to return to Ashwood House. Breathing heavily, Clara glanced back at the mansion as she reached her car. In an upstairs window, she saw the ghostly figure of her Aunt Margaret watching her. The whispers faded, but the memory of that night would haunt her forever. She drove away, never looking back.
Ravenswood Mansion loomed on the hill, surrounded by dense, dark woods. Its windows were dark, and the setting sun painted the sky with deep orange hues, casting eerie shadows across the land. Inside, the mansion's foyer was grand but covered in dust. A large, winding staircase led to the upper floors. An old chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals dull and dusty, hinting at the mansion's forgotten grandeur. The living room had a large fireplace with cold ashes, a dusty rug, and old furniture covered in white sheets. Faint light filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows on the walls. The kitchen was in disrepair, with broken cabinets and rusted appliances. A large wooden table sat in the center, covered in cobwebs. The air was thick with the scent of decay and neglect. The dining room featured a long table with a dusty tablecloth and overturned chairs. The windows were boarded up, and the room was dimly lit by a single candle, casting flickering shadows on the walls. A grand staircase wound upward into darkness. The steps creaked underfoot, and the banister was thick with dust. A faint, eerie light glowed at the top of the stairs, beckoning yet foreboding. The master bedroom featured a large canopy bed covered in dust and cobwebs. The cracked windows allowed moonlight to filter through, illuminating the peeling wallpaper and adding to the room's eerie atmosphere. The basement was dark and damp, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Old rusty chains hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. The sense of dread was palpable. A hidden room in the basement was filled with old books and strange artifacts. A large cracked mirror reflected a distorted image, and a single candle flickered on a dusty desk, casting unsettling shadows. As dawn broke, Ravenswood Mansion was bathed in soft, golden light. The shadows receded, but the mansion still looked eerie and abandoned. Birds began to sing, but the air was still heavy with the night's terrors.
Emma, a young writer in her late 20s, inherits an old mansion called Ravenwood Manor from her estranged uncle. She decides to visit the house, hoping it will be a quiet place to write her novel. As she arrives, she feels an unsettling chill in the air. The house, surrounded by dark woods, looks like it hasn't been touched in years. Vines creep up the stone walls, and the windows are dark and foreboding. On her first night, Emma struggles to sleep. The house creaks and groans as if it's alive. She hears footsteps in the hallway and the faint sound of whispers. When she investigates, she finds nothing but darkness and silence. She returns to bed, feeling uneasy. The next day, while exploring the house, Emma discovers a locked door in the basement. Curious, she searches the house and finds an old, rusty key hidden in a drawer. She uses the key to unlock the door and finds a small room filled with old furniture, cobwebs, and a large ornate mirror covered with a cloth. Emma removes the cloth from the mirror and, to her shock, sees the reflection of a young girl standing behind her. When she turns around, no one is there. The mirror begins to show disturbing images of past events in the house, including a girl being trapped and crying for help. Emma feels a chill run down her spine. Determined to find out more, Emma searches the house and finds an old diary hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace. The diary belonged to her uncle and details a tragic story of a girl named Lily who lived in the house and mysteriously disappeared. Emma realizes the ghost she saw as Lily, trapped in the mirror. Emma decides to perform a seance to communicate with Lily's spirit. She sets up candles and chants words from the diary. The room grows cold and Lily's ghost appears, revealing that she was trapped by a dark ritual performed by Emma's uncle. Lily begs Emma to free her. Following Lily's instructions, Emma gathers the items needed to break the ritual: a locket, a piece of Lily's clothing, and a special incantation. As she performs the ritual, the house shakes violently, and a dark, malevolent spirit tries to stop her. Emma persists, chanting the incantation louder and louder. The dark spirit attacks, but Emma continues the ritual, calling out to Lily for strength. A bright light fills the room, and the dark spirit screams before dissipating into nothingness. Lily's spirit smiles gratefully at Emma before ascending into the light, finally freed. With the haunting over, the house feels lighter and more welcoming. Emma finishes her novel, inspired by Lily's story. She decides to keep Ravenwood Manor and transform it into a place of peace and creativity. Sitting on the porch, she feels a deep connection to the house and its history, ready for a new beginning.
In the heart of Blackwood Forest, a group of friends, Jack, Sarah, Luke, and Emma, embarks on a dare to explore the forbidden woods. As they enter the forest, tall trees cast long shadows, and a sense of foreboding hangs in the air. Pushing deeper into the forest, they follow a winding path that seems to disappear into the shadows. The air grows cooler, and strange noises echo through the trees. Despite their growing unease, they press on, driven by curiosity and adrenaline. Suddenly, they stumble upon a moonlit clearing, the ground littered with decaying leaves and gnarled roots. In the center stands an ancient, dilapidated cabin, its windows shattered and its doors hanging off their hinges. The air is heavy with the stench of decay. With trepidation, they approach the cabin and cautiously step inside. The interior is shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from their flickering flashlights. Cobwebs cling to the walls and the floorboards creak ominously beneath their feet. As they explore further, they begin to hear faint whispers that seem to emanate from the walls themselves. The whispers grow louder and more insistent, filling the cabin with an otherworldly chorus that sends shivers down their spines. Suddenly, a dark shadow materializes before them, its form shifting and twisting in the dim light. It looms over them, its eyes glowing with malevolence as it reaches out with ghostly hands. Frozen with fear, they realize they have awakened something ancient and sinister. With a collective scream, the friends flee from the cabin, their hearts pounding with terror. They race through the forest, the shadows closing in around them as they run. Behind them, they can hear the echoing laughter of the darkness that lurks within Blackwood Forest. Exhausted and trembling, the friends emerge from Blackwood Forest, their minds reeling from the horrors they've witnessed. They vow never to return to the haunted woods, haunted by the shadows that lurk within its depths. In the heart of Hollow Creek, an abandoned house sits atop a hill, its windows shattered and its doors hanging off their hinges. The locals whisper tales of a family who disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the echoes of their screams. But when a group of teenagers decides to spend the night in the house, they quickly realize that the rumors were just the beginning of the horrors that await them. As the group of teenagers gathers outside the house, they dare each other to spend the night inside, eager to prove their bravery. With nervous laughter and shaky hands, they push open the creaking door and step inside, their hearts pounding in their chests. Little do they know they're about to come face to face with the horrors that lie within. As the teenagers explore the house, they feel an oppressive presence weighing down on them, a sense of malevolence that seems to seep from the very walls. They hear whispers in the darkness and catch fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures out of the corners of their eyes. Fear grips them tight as they realize they're not alone in the house. As the night wears on, the teenagers uncover clues about the house's dark past. A family torn apart by tragedy, their spirits trapped within the walls for eternity. They find old photographs and newspaper clippings, piecing together the story of the family's demise. But as they delve deeper, they awaken something sinister that has been lying dormant for years. As the night progresses, the house comes alive with paranormal activity. Doors slam shut on their own, objects move of their own accord, and ghostly apparitions appear in the darkness. The teenagers huddle together, their screams echoing through the empty halls as they realize they're trapped in a nightmare from which there's no escape. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, the teenagers make a final stand against the evil that haunts the house. Armed with makeshift weapons and fierce determination, they confront the ghostly apparitions that roam the halls, knowing that their survival depends on their ability to banish the darkness that lurks within. As dawn breaks, the paranormal activity subsides, and the house falls silent once more. The teenagers emerge from that darkness, battered and bruised but alive. They exchange weary smiles, knowing that they've faced their fears and emerged stronger for it. Though the scars of their ordeal will never fully heal, they take solace in the knowledge that they've conquered the darkness that once threatened to consume them.
Emma, a young writer in her late 20s, inherits Blackwood Manor from her estranged grandmother. The manor is located on the outskirts of a small town surrounded by dense, dark woods. Emma decides to move in, hoping the isolation will inspire her writing. As she arrives, she feels an eerie chill. The mansion, with its tall spires and ivy-covered walls, seems to loom over her ominously. Despite her unease, Emma is determined to make this her new home. On her first night, Emma struggles to sleep. The house is filled with strange noises, the creaking of floorboards, the whisper of the wind through cracks in the windows, and distant, indistinct whispers. She hears what sounds like footsteps outside her bedroom door, but when she checks, no one is there. She returns to bed, her mind racing with unease and exhaustion. The next day, while exploring the house, Emma discovers a locked door in the attic. Curious, she searches the house and finds an old, rusty key hidden in a drawer. She uses the key to unlock the door and finds a small